Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Repro 360 GnRH webinar on some new GnRH-based synchronization protocols we have for beef cattle herds. These protocols, we have been in touch with some of our international experts to be able to bring to you the most recent in the literature, at least. Just to be able to give those producers that are EU accredited some options moving forward for their AI programs. Just before I start, just a little bit of housekeeping. On the right-hand side on the little webinar pane, you'll see there's a section for questions. Throughout the presentation, I really do welcome questions to be posted there. If you can post them right at the end when we have question time, I'll do my best to answer those questions for everybody. So let's get started. So before I commence, I'd just like to acknowledge the co-author of this presentation, Gabriel Bow. Gabriel is very well known to our country. He has spent a lot of time in Australia consulting to us, assisting producers and veterinarians on their best options, particularly in the field of fixed time AI. He has helped me together work these protocols out and directed us in which way he believes is the best to go for our industry. So thank you, Gabriel. For those that do not know me, I'm Dr. Sophia Edwards. I'm the technical specialist for reproduction at Acknowledgements. I have a PhD in estrus synchronization in beef cattle, and I've had quite extensive experience in fixed time AI in Australian beef cattle herds. So just a bit of an outline of what we're going to do today. First off, I'll just review the decision that was made by UCAS. And then we'll move forward, and I'll give you a simple lesson on cattle reproduction. And when I say this is simple, I just want to give you the background so you understand what GnRH is, how GnRH works, the limitations around GnRH programs. This will be simple because I do need to stretch it across a variety of audience that we have logged in today. Then the reason I want to do this is because when I step you through the protocols at the end of the presentation, it'll give you a better understanding as to why we have designed the protocols the way they are. They are just a little bit different to what you would see in conventional programs. So at the end, we'll go step through the protocol options. We've got two options for you. We have an option for those that want to just approach the programs as a simple fixed time AI with no fuss, I guess, with everything that fixed time AI delivers. But because of some of the limitations to GnRH programs, we've also got a program, I called it aided heat detection. It doesn't need full observations of heat, but it's just a little bit more intervention for those that just want that little bit extra pregnancy rate and have the resources and are willing to do the work. And at the end, as I said, question time. Please make sure you post your questions throughout the presentation, and I can answer them as I get towards the end. So the UCAS decision. So back in September, the European Union Cattle Accreditation Scheme Advisory Board, they formally banned the use of oestradiol and its ester-like derivatives on EU accredited properties. So this ban was actually for the entire property where EU cattle exists, not in specific groups of animals. However, they did state that gonadotrophins and prostaglandins, so essentially GnRH and PG, if that's the terminology you're used to, are permitted for use in these animals. And previous communications, they have permitted the use of progesterone devices as well. So the programs that we have for you are all within the decision that was made by UCAS. So as I mentioned, I'd just like to step you through a very simple, I guess, lesson on cattle reproduction. I understand for some of the viewers today that this may be very basic, it may be a refresher, or it might be completely new to those that haven't seen it before. So in a cow, we roughly have per estrus cycle, we expect it to last around about 21 days. It can last anywhere from 18 to 23 days. And during this period of time, we have this process which we call follicular waves. Now, a follicle, for those that are not aware, are a fluid-filled sac on the ovary, and within this fluid-filled sac is the egg, or what we call the oocyte. So what happens is we have a process where a big pool of these follicles is recruited forward. And what happens is over time, these follicles progress through, and there's a process of dominance. So some follicles will become larger and become dominant, and then others will die and become what we call accredited. Now, whilst ever there is progesterone in the system, everything in a follicular wave will become accredited. So if we remove progesterone from the system, what happens is this follicular wave will come forward, a follicle grows, and then proceeds all the way through to ovulation. In the cow, because they only have one offspring, they only have one ovulation, it's usually only one follicle that progresses through to ovulation. In rare circumstances, of course, there can be two. So usually in cows, we see around about 3 of these per cycle. So the basics around managing and estrus synchronization is all about us controlling that follicular wave and manipulating it so that we have a beautiful follicle at the time that we want to AI the animals. So to the top left here is an image of cattle ovaries, and you can see these fluid-filled sacs, and there's little ones there as well, bigger ones, which have the egg in there. Now, when we have a follicle that is greater than 10 millimeters in diameter, it starts to become responsive to GnRH. If we administer GnRH to an animal that has a follicle greater than 10 mils in diameter, it will be effective. When we give GnRH, it starts a cascade of events. So by giving GnRH, we end up having a surge in another hormone in the cow called LH. But most importantly, for what you need to remember, is that if we do apply GnRH in a cow with a larger follicle, it usually creates ovulation. It's not 100%. The greater the follicle diameter at the time that we administer GnRH, the more likely that we will actually cause that animal to artificially ovulate. Now, the process of ovulation ends up causing a gland to form on the ovary called a corpus luteum, or a CL, as most of you may know it. So at the site where the ovulation has occurred, this little volcano-like structure appears very quickly, and it produces the hormone called progesterone. So for your purposes, really what you need to understand is that GnRH can cause ovulation, and basically that elevates progesterone in the cow. The limitations we have to GnRH-based programs are the fact that sometimes the GnRH, as I mentioned before, can be a little bit hit and miss in its actions. So in some circumstances, we don't find it to be as effective. This could be the circumstance where you may have non-cycling cows, cows that may be in very low body condition score, and heifers as well don't tend to be as responsive. So in general, that is why we have always recommended oestradiol-based programs in preference to GnRH-based programs, simply because the estradiol and progesterone-based programs, when you use a dose of estradiol with a Q-mate, you do get very reliable follicular control. However, because of the new regulations, we are bound by using these protocols. So if we just put this in one big picture, and assuming that ovulation occurs at day 0, this is in a normal cycling cow that has had no intervention. Remember that ovulation causes that CL to form, which increases progesterone. And in a normal cycling cow, to ensure that we can then have a subsequent ovulation, we need the removal of progesterone, which is P4 here, which then allows that follicle to grow and then cause ovulation again. So how does this look on the old programs? Many of you may be aware of GnRH-based programs that in the past may have been called OvSync, CoSync, those sorts of names. And this is typically the basis of the program that was used. So in the past, what we would do is we would inject a GnRH and insert a Q-mate at day 0. Now remember, when I said we inject GnRH, if we have a follicle that is greater than 10 mils in diameter, usually pretty reliably we will cause ovulation. But as I said, sometimes it can be a little bit hit and miss, and certainly the smaller follicle, the less likely it's to work. So at this point in time, we don't really know whether the cow does have a big follicle or not. But realistically, the reason we want to cause ovulation at this point in time is that we need to initiate a new follicular wave. If we can initiate this new follicular wave, what we can do is control the precise time at when we want her to ovulate according to our AI time. And it's that process that allows us to fix time AI. So remember, however, we can't get the follicle to grow and ovulate until we get rid of progesterone. So that's simple, because we just remove our progesterone device by pulling the Q-mate out, and then we administer prostaglandin. Prostaglandin, or as many of you may know as PG, it causes the CL to basically die, regress, and then that completely removes any progesterone in the system, enabling that follicle to grow. So this then, if we administer GnRH again at the time of fixed time AI, because we know we have a lovely big follicle here, because we've set it up before, it reliably allows us to have fixed time AI, and any cow that hasn't spontaneously decided to ovulate herself from this GnRH injection will ovulate roughly 30 hours afterwards, or no later than 30 hours later. So that is the concept and the basis behind how GnRH programs in the past have operated. So what about the new GnRH protocols? So the new GnRH protocols are based on the literature, and what they found in the research, and this has been a concept that has been entertained for probably at least 10 years now, and hence why we're confident to recommend these protocols to you, is that we are focusing on increasing the period from the time of QMate removal through to the time of fixed time AI. So if you can remember, or if you're familiar with the previous old programs, usually this time period was roughly, around 54 to 60 hours of when we would be inseminating. These protocols try and stretch this period out to 72 hours, at least in cows. And we know that the longer that period is, the better fertility. It's, of course, still the bigger follicle that we can grow generally relates to better fertility. But that essentially, out of all the protocols that I'm presenting to you, is the basis of where new concepts, I guess, are headed. Now, in order to do this and extend the back end of the program, we've actually now had to decrease the time that the QMate's inserted into the animal. So for the purposes of these protocols, we only insert the QMate for 5 days, whereas in previous protocols, you would have seen the QMate be in for at least 7 days. If you left the QMate in for 7 days, you will see ovulation a little bit sooner, and you won't get this lovely, nice period in here. So if we just try and map our follicles against this program, imagine that we have a large diameter follicle at the time that we insert the QMate and inject GnRH. If we have that, and remember, we don't know where these animals are up to, but if we have a lovely big follicle there, it's more than likely that we're going to cause ovulation and create a CL. Any other follicle will then just become atretic and die. And by initiating this process, what we have is a lovely new follicular wave that comes through. Now, if we inject GnRH at this point in time, and let's say we have a smaller follicular diameter, say it's only 5 mils, it's not a problem. I mean, GnRH will not work, but it doesn't matter, because if it's only a small follicle, it's going to be a new follicle. And so by the time it gets through to ovulation, it's not going to be old. What we want to reduce seeing is these big follicles that persist all the way through to the program, because by the time they get to ovulation, they can be old and then have reduced fertility. Now, the important thing to note, and this is for cow programs only, is this section of the program. I understand that this section of the program requires a lot more handling than your stereotypical OV-sync co-sync programs. What we have here is that we need to administer prostaglandin on the day that we remove the QMate at least twice. By giving prostaglandin twice, at least 8 hours apart, we make sure that we remove the corpus luteum. Now, what we do know is that a corpus luteum that is 5 days old or less does not respond very well to PG. So if you only administer 1 dose of PG, there is a risk that you won't completely remove that corpus luteum. So what ends up happening is that then you aren't able to grow that follicle through to the time of ovulation. So by administering 2 injections, there's a high reliability that we remove the corpus luteum from the ovary. In the studies when they developed these programs, they did look at giving a double dose of prostaglandin in the morning when they removed the QMate. That generated a better result than just a single dose of prostaglandin. However, the best result was obtained when they had 2 doses of prostaglandin. So once we are able to remove that, we allow the follicle to grow forward. And in cows, this enables a fixed time AI at 7 o'clock in the morning with a GnRH injection. So this program is for those that just want a simple fixed time AI and have no heat detection whatsoever. So now let's have a look at the heifers for simple fixed time AI. The Heifer program is based on the same concept in the fact that we're looking to extend this period between QMate insertion and the QMate removal and the time of fixed time AI. However, it's a little bit simpler for a couple of reasons. When we put the QMate in, we don't really know what part of the cycle they're at. But what we do know is that, remember how I said that GnRH can be a little bit hit and miss when you give it to heifers, and particularly if it's in a smaller follicle diameter. So when they looked through the literature, what they found is that there was no pregnancy rate difference between heifers that received GnRH at the start of QMate insertion or not. So this meant that we could just simply put a QMate in. Now, as I said, we don't really know where our follicles are going to be at. In heifers, progesterone alone, so the insertion of a QMate can actually cause a new follicular wave to come through on its own. But because it's a shorter period, if we do happen to have a dominant follicle that persists all the way through, it's not such a bad problem in heifers as compared to cows. So we may have a CL, we may not, but what the good part about this program is because we haven't induced ovulation on day 0, we are pretty confident that our CL on day 5 is going to be older than 5 days old. So therefore, we only need to give 1 injection of prostaglandin. We remove the corpus luteum, or the CL, which then allows the follicle to grow through. And at 66 hours, which is shorter than the cow program, we then inject GnRH and fixed time AI. Just to note, to enable a morning AI, this means removing the QMates at 2 p.m. on day 5. Most people that have used fixed time AI in the past would be used to removing their QMates in the morning. So this is actually an afternoon removal. So now I move forward to the same protocol, but what I like to call aided heat detection. So the concept of this protocol is exactly the same as what I presented you for the cows previously. So what we have here is that the difference is just in the timing of fixed time AI. We inject GnRH and insert our QMate. However, on day 5, what we do is we apply a heat mount detector. So it's purely up to you what you'd like to use. My preference tends to be the scratchies, but you could use tail paint, which is quite cheap, or Kmars. I like these ones because I think they're just a little bit more reliable in the story they're telling you. Now, there is no need in these programs to actually physically watch the animals for heat detection if you don't wish to. We don't want to take away from, the benefits that fixed time AI gives us. Then at day 7, what we do is at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, so we've removed them at 7 a.m., anything that has had the patch sufficiently rubbed, we then go forward and fix time AI. Please note there is no need to give GnRH here because these cows have had their own heat, so we know they're going to ovulate. Anything that wasn't sufficiently scratched, don't get inseminated at this point in time. In the morning, on day 8, which is 72 hours, you then fix time AI, everything that you didn't inseminate the afternoon before, and inject a dose of GnRH. Now, this is why I quite like this approach, is because what we know is the cows that inseminated on day 7 are more likely to have a better pregnancy rate than those on day 8. So what this enables us to do is if we have rare semen, expensive semen, or even sex-sorted semen, where we know that it doesn't have the duration to survive in the tract, we do inseminate at day 7. At day 8, because we know that we have less pregnancy rate at this point in time, you can either choose to not inseminate these females, use a cheaper dose of semen or conventional semen if you're using sex-sorted. So it just enables you to just add a couple of little things into the program to try and just get a little bit better outcomes of what you're trying to achieve. A very similar approach for the heifers, exactly the same protocol as I presented in the fixed time AI. However, the timing is different. We apply the heat mount detector, and 3 p.m. we basically breed anything that has scratched, and then no GnRH, and on day 8 we fix time everything and inject GnRH. So on these aided heat detection programs, they are likely to be a little bit cheaper in terms of your drug spend, because not everything is receiving a dose of GnRH. However, then you do have the added expense of the heat mount detector. So I don't think either of them are going to be, much difference in terms of your cost of synchronization. So I'd just like to show you where we have these protocols for your future reference. We have an online resource, repro360.com.au. And if I just bring this screen in, hopefully you can see it now. And on this screen, what you will see is a section for vets. I hope this is coming up okay for you. And then common protocols. And under the common protocols section, we have split out the programs, and all the information you require is listed under this section, with the heat detection aided, a drop-down box, a little bit of detail, and if there's ever any questions, you can easily click this button and you can refer your questions through to our team. Please also note that under here, if there is a PDF brochure, and you can click there, and basically everything that I've presented to you today is listed there. And also for any of those that want some more in-depth technical reading, the references from where we've, the literature where we've actually drawn these protocols from exist there. Also, for those that haven't joined our webinars before, under the resources section and the webinars link, we basically upload all these webinars for future reference if you just want to go over something that I've said previously. So just headed back to our presentation. In summary, sorry, my screen's just got to get back on that mode. In summary, we know now that oestradiol-based programs are banned for use on EU accredited properties. This ban is now beneficial. In the past, I guess it wasn't overly clear. The protocols that we have presented are our recommendations for producers that are bound by these regulations. So although these are the new and what we consider to be the best practice protocols for GnRH, if you're not an EU accredited producer, they may not be your first line of choice program. An estradiol-based program may be an option for you. And I really encourage you to talk with your veterinarian, your AI producer, or of course, you're more than welcome to contact us through the Repro 360 resource to be able to determine what is the best option for you. I truly believe, because the limitations of GnRH-based programs, that utilising that aided heat detection can be a really great tool for those that are willing to put a little bit of extra effort in to get a better pregnancy rate. Or it's not only that if you're not willing, if you have the resources, the yards, etc., to do it. Sometimes I understand there's a lot more involved in those programs. It does require an AI technician over the 2 days. So it's not for everyone, but for those that do have the capacity to do it, I think it's a really great tool. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. I hope it has been informative. For those that have attended, there's just a really quick survey that will be emailed to you at the end of it. I'd really welcome your feedback on how it was. And also I'd like to know of any topics that you guys would like to hear of from us in the past for anyone else. And I've just got some questions here. I've got 2 questions. So the first question is PMSG or ECG is now very difficult to get in supply. And am I still recommending it for use in Bos indicus cattle? So the answer to that question is yes, it is in short supply. Do I still recommend it for Bos indicus cattle? Absolutely. It is an effective drug in animals, particularly when they're at risk of an estrus or non-cyclers. And we know that Bos indicus cattle, particularly wet cows, do struggle with that. I have answered this question to a lot of people who have been contacting us, and they have been questioning in respect to what the options are in the absence of ECG. You basically, all I can recommend is to feed them better if you can. The other option is to be able to remove the calves temporarily of what we call a 48-hour wean. 48-hour wean, what it does in the cow is causes LH surges to occur naturally, which promotes that follicular growth, which is pretty much what the action of ECG does. I think if you look back on our webinars page, I think there's a webinar that I ran called Practical Tips for Implementing Fixed Time AI. In that, there, if you take the time to listen to that, there are some tips about that, which could be an option. The second question I have here is it necessary to use Qmate or a progesterone device in these programs? So the answer to that is yes, it is necessary, particularly, well, for 2 reasons. Number one, in cows, they're generally lactating, and again, it comes back to that non-cycling issue of we need to help them out. GnRH on its own will not be sufficient to be able to bring a non-cycling or a nutritionally stressed cow into action. Secondly, with the heifers, you will note there was no GnRH injection at the start of the program. So without that progesterone device, effectively the programs will be ineffective. Progesterone does complement GnRH programs really well because it does make, I guess, that whole process of initiating that new follicular wave much more reliable. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. There's no further questions. And as I said, this will be recorded and uploaded to the Repro 360 website. Thank you.